Greetings, YouTube and fellow traditionalist Catholics. This is Sergius II, and welcome back to my channel. And now we're continuing with part 3 of chapter 1 of A Dark History, The Popes, by Brenda Ralph Lewis. So, in the last video, we just finished off with the cadaver side nod with Pope Stephen VI putting his predecessor, Pope Formosus, on trial for several accusations thrown against him. And then we see back and forth, Formosus' body being dug up and given a burial. Well, back and forth, being dug up and buried again and all that. So now we start off with one of Stephen VI's other successors, Pope Sergius III. Sergius III is the Latin pronunciation for my name, Sergio. But if you were to pronounce my name in Spanish, it's Sergio. I don't know how you pronounce my name in Italian. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. I'm pretty sure that's how you. You know what? I think the way how you pronounce my name in English is, I think it's probably the same thing as in Italian, because in Spanish it's Sergio, and I'm Mexican, so I know how to pronounce my name in a different language. But Sergius is the Roman pronunciation for my name. So now we're going to get into the history of Pope Sergius III. Now, before we do that, there was one thing I wanted to read here in this blue part on page 13, which is a monastery. If you can see right here, sorry, you can see where my fingers are at, where it says Benedict IX, the 3 times Pope. Okay, well, Benedict IX is one of uh, Pope Sergius III's later descendants, because Sergius III is the first of the Tusculan clan popes. So here we go. Benedict IX was born in around 12. Benedict IX was born in around 1012 into a family with plenty of political, military, and papal muscle. Two of his uncles preceded him as Pope. Two of his uncles preceded him as Pope Benedict VIII and Pope John XIX. And his father, Albrecht III, Count of Tusculum, was influential enough to secure the throne of St. Peter for him when he was around 20 years of age. Needless to say, Benedict was one of the youngest popes ever, and he was highly placed in the dissolute stakes as well. Benedict was described as feasting on immorality and a demon from hell in the disguise of a priest. He was also accused of many vile adulteries and murders. A later Pope, Victor III, charged him with rapes, murders, and other unspeakable acts. Benedict's life, Pope Victor continued. Benedict's life, Pope Victor continued, was so vile, so foul, so execrable, so ex, ex, execrable. Execrable that I shuddered to think of it. For good measures, Benedict was also indicted for homosexuality and bestiality. If you thought that John the 12th was bad, which both Benedict, Sergius, and both came from the same family, well, Benedict proved to be worse. I thought for a while that John the 12th would be bad than his later descendant, but Benedict proved to be worse. So I guess I was gravely mistaken the way how I've read read their backgrounds for a long time. Okay. So where was I? Okay. Benedict's hold over his throne was tenuous. His enemies forced him out of Rome in 1036 and again in 1045 when he sold his office for 680 kilograms of gold to his godfather, John Gretin, the archpriest of St. John Lateran, who afterwards became Pope Gregory VI. The payment drained the Vatican treasury so greatly that, for a time, there was not enough money to pay the papal bills. 600, okay, 680 kilograms of gold to his godfather. Well, not just gold, but silver too, which history also states. So gold and silver were paid to his godfather. From what others have said, let's see, 680 kilograms. From what I've been hearing, 1,000 pounds of gold and silver. But I've been hearing most of the time silver. So it looks like both gold and silver were added. And this, so this right here literally drained the Vatican treasury. So apparently Benedict had been accused of simony by selling off the Vatican to his godfather, who became Pope Gregory VI. Having having secured his booty, Benedict set off for a life of leisure and pleasure at one of his castles in the country. He had plans to marry, but the lady in question, a second cousin, turned him down. So yeah, so after Benedict's resignation from the throne a second time, he was said he wanted to get married. He wanted to get married to a cousin of his, which some would, which honestly I don't know of. I'm pretty sure it counts that if you're going to marry someone within your family, I'm pretty sure it counts as incest because he wanted to marry a cousin. So marrying close kin, which is one word of family, which which is the definition. Very unusual and I would say disturbing. And I'm pretty sure that marrying a cousin would be considered incest because it's someone in your family. I understand if you were to do some things with a sibling, it would be also grotesque. But marrying a cousin, I mean, I've heard of monarchs that have married who have had to marry their own cousins in order to keep the family bloodline pure. If you look at the House of Habsburg, I mean, they were known for awful inbreeding. So, yeah, I think marrying your own cousin would actually count as incest because this is what Benedict was doing when he left the papacy a second time. So let's continue. Within a few months, Benedict was back in Rome, attempting to retrieve his throne. He failed and was driven out by infuriated nobles in 1046. Another attempt met the same resistance, and Benedict was finally thrown out in 1048. In 1049, Benedict was accused of simony, but failed to appear in court to answer the charges. As punishment, he was excommunicated. After that, Benedict more or less disappeared from the records. The exact date of his death remains unknown. It may have taken place in 1056, while he was preparing to launch a renewed attempt at retrieving the papal throne. Another date for Benedict's demise was 1065, and he had seemingly repented of his numerous sins and died as a penitent at the Abbey of Grottaforata in the Alban Hills, 20 kilometers, 12 miles southeast of Rome. So the picture of the monastery I showed you, Benedict had taken the throne 3 times in 3 different terms. I know we're going to get into more detail later on as we move forward. So, so this is just a quick brief history with Benedict IX, the last of the Tusculan popes. So we're going to get in with the first Tusculan pope, Sergius III. Here we go. Sergius III, the most wicked of men. And right there is his picture, bald-headed man, if you can see. Well, I'm going to be using that picture as my thumbnail. Well, I'm going to read this little sentence right here on the bottom of the picture. The critics of scandalous popes heaped virtually every pe- pe- pejorative they knew on Sergius III and his descendant lifestyle. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. And his decadent lifestyle. Sorry if I mispronounced some words. But here we go. Pope Sergius III. Sergius III was once described as the source of infinite ambitions amongst light women and the slave of every vice of the most wicked of men. His personal as well as his public life as pope was said to be one long procession of scandal and dissidence, which included the murder of one and possibly two popes. Yes, Sergius III is known for killing his own immediate predecessor in order to secure the throne. One word that I mispronounced, dissident, and I noticed the word dissidence. Okay, sorry, I apologize. I'm gonna try not to make this video as long as the other two. It appears that Sergius ordered the murders of both Pope Leo V and the anti-Pope Christopher, who were strangled in prison in 904 CE. So, that's true. Sergius III had his predecessor, Pope Leo V, and an anti-claimant, anti-Pope Christopher, had them both killed in order to secure the throne. That done, the way was clear for Sergius to become Pope himself. 3 years later, Pope Sergius acquired a mistress, Marozia, whose mother, Theodora, gave her to him when she was only 15 years old. So, that's another true thing, which we'll later see with Pope Alexander VI. Sergius III had a mistress who was only 15 years old. Now, I know people would find that insane. That people would find that insane that an old man would have a mistress with someone that's like very young. I'm I'm pretty sure without a doubt there were no statutory laws like long ago. As long as young girls like they're like between the ages of 12 and up, I guess that was okay somehow. I'm just saying. Like I said, there were like no statutory laws like you would see in this current timeline that we have today all around the world. Sergius was 30 years old, Marazia's senior, but it seems he had lusted after Marazia for 9 years. Okay, Sergius was 30 years old at the time. Okay, for 9 years. Ever since they met at the notorious Cadaver Synod of 897. Now, like I said in the last video, Sergius III was a bishop at the time of the Cadaver Synod. At the Cadaver Synod, when Pope Stephen VI put Pope Formosus' body on trial for perjury and other church laws that have been broken during Formosus' time as a bishop, and then later as Pope. So here we go. Even from an early age, Marazia had possessed a strong sexual attraction, and although she was by no means Sergius's only lover, he never forgot her. Sergius and Marazia had a son who became Pope John the Sergius and Marazia had a son who became John the 11th, so making Sergius the only pope on record as the father of another pope. Okay, that's another true thing. These two had an illegitimate child, even though the biological son to a pope. Biological, but illegitimate. Well, maybe not illegitimate. The fact that Marazia was a noble woman. So yeah. So I guess Sergius' son is legitimate, but later on with Pope Alexander VI, I mean, his children were biological but illegitimate because Alexander's wife that he married later when he was a cardinal was an Italian prostitute. So therefore, making Alexander's children illegitimate, and of course having more children along with the mistress, also making them illegitimate, but rose to the ranks during Alexander's time as pope. So yeah, so I guess Pope Sergius' son, who later becomes John the 11th, is legitimate. I kept thinking for a long time illegitimate because when I was going through some online history, I guess some online stuff may be some online stuff might have been wrong. So here we go. Okay, so making Sergius the only pope on record as the father of another pope. As for Morazia, her 4-year-old affair. As for Morazia, sorry. Sorry again. Sometimes I mess up when reading. Sorry. As for Morazia, her 4-year affair with Pope Sergius, who died in 911 CE, seems to have given her a taste of papal power and the pursuit of pope making. So after Sergius III died in 911 CE or AD, I say AD a lot, but it says CE, meaning current era. He dies, so Morazia is now in pursuit of more power within the papacy and pope making. So therefore, we'll see her son rise through the ranks, becoming Pope John the 11th. Here we go. Now we're gonna get into more. Okay, so here's a portrait of Morazia. This is her picture. That's Sergius III's mistress right there, and the mother of Pope John the 11th. Sergius, then a cardinal, had been a co-judge at the Cadaver Synod in 897 CE and became infuriated with the guilty verdict was overturned. So Sergius III at the time was a bishop. Oh, he was a cardinal. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sometimes I get a little lost. So Sergius at the time was a cardinal who was a co-judge at the Cadaver Synod when Stephen VI had Formosus put on trial, and wasn't happy with the guilty verdict was overturned, and became infuriated when the verdict was overturned. Okay, so even though Formosa's body was found guilty, but didn't like the idea of having the guilty verdict overturned. This time, Sergius restored the guilty judgment and added some ghoulish touches to his own. Okay, so Sergius III, during his pontificate, makes Formosus guilty again and makes everything worse for Formosus' corpse. He had Formosus' corpse beheaded and cut off more of his fingers. So more of his fingers, including his head, were cut off once Sergius had ordered for his body to be retrieved once again. More of his fingers before co-signing him to the river Tiber once more. So Formosus' body once again is tossed in the Tiber. As I've said and read through the pages, guilty once, thrown in the Tiber, buried, thrown in the Tiber, dug back, buried again, dug back up, yada yada yada. And here we see Pope Sergius III um, getting more crazier with what to do with Formosus. Just making Formosus' own body. Well, I'm sorry. I'm just saying that he's just making things worse for poor Formosus, whose body's just being abused at this point. Can't get any rest. To emphasize his message, Sergius ordered a flattering epitaph for Sergius, epitaph for Stephen VI be inscribed for Stephen VI be inscribed on his tomb. Not long afterwards, Formosus' headless corpse surfaced again when it became entangled in a fisherman's net. Retrieved from the Tiber for a second time, Formosus was returned once more to St. Peter's Church. Sergius had, of course, contravened the prohibition on posthumous trials declared by John IX, so his actions were essentially invalid. Nonetheless, a public statement of Formosus' innocence had to be made, and both he and his work were formally reinstated yet again. Thrown in the Tiber, retrieved again, this time by a fisherman that Formosa's body was caught in a net and then taken back to St. Peter's. So we're seeing again back and forth with Formosa's body just being abused, buried, dug up, tossed in the river, yada yada. Despite the accusations that Formosus has had to put up with, and then right here with his body, I'm starting to feel bad for him. That Formosus would be being retrieved over and over again. So I don't know if Formosus has been given a proper burial. I don't know if he's buried in St. Peter's. So returned once more to St. Peter's Church. Sergius had, of course, contravened the prohibition on posthumous trials declared by Pope John IX, so his actions were essentially invalid. Nonetheless, a public statement of Formosus' innocence had to be made, and both he and his work were formally reinstated yet again. The chief instigator of the original Cadaver Synod, Algertrude, was still alive when Formosus was exonerated for a second time, but her position and her power had radically altered because through the extraordinary antics of Stephen VI, she had triumphed over the dead pope in 896 CE, but she had a weakness. Algertrude's power, while considerable, was essentially second-hand, relying on puppets like Pope Stephen, who could be maneuvered into the positions she wanted them to occupy, and from there implemented her policies. Also important in Algertrude's armory were certain family relationships that gave her the high status she enjoyed from the positions occupied by her husband, Guy of Spoleto, and after him by their son Lambert. When Guy died on 12 December 894 CE, Algertrude instantly lost her standing as Duchess of Spoleto and Camerino, Queen of Italy and Holy Roman Empress. There was still some kudos to be had from Lambert's elevation to all these titles, but he died before his mother in 898 CE, and Algertrude's last family link with power disappeared. Algertrude died in 923 CE, but by that time, two other women had discovered another way into the corridors of papal power in Rome. They were Theodora and her daughter Morazia, both of them the mistresses, the mistresses, the mistresses of popes. Theodora was described as a shameless strumpet, and her two daughters, Morazia and the younger Theodora, as possessing reputations not much better than their mother. Neither the elder Theodora nor Morazia halted the rapid turnover that had become a regular feature of the papacy. If anything, they exasperated it in the first years of the 10th century. Short pontificates of a year or less persisted, and so did the violent deaths of popes that reflected the young ongoing struggle for power. Others managed to survive for a year or two, but rarely much more. Popes succeeded one popes succeeded one another with such rapidity that papal servants made a handsome profit selling off their personal accoutrements and furnishings. So, with Sergius gone, and I would say, in my opinion, that the 10th century was like a dark era for the papacy. I would say a dark era because a lot of popes would remain on the throne for a short time, die within a year or two, like what it says here. Some deposed, some murdered. But keep in mind, Europe was still in the Dark Ages at this time. Didn't pull itself out of the Dark Ages um, by the end of the 11th century in 1099 with the First Crusade, because it took Europe a long time for to like get itself out of the mud, even though the Holy Roman Empire was still thriving at the time. But for the papacy, it was pretty dark, because we'll see later with John the 12th, just to see knowing how bad he was and how immoral he also was. But then follow up more again with other descendants with Benedict the Ninth, which we'll later get on. Now this next one, rule of the harlots, but petty theft. but petty theft was very small. But petty theft was very small beer compared to the corruption, licentious, licentiousness, and venality of this period, which was known as the papal pornocracy or the rule of the harlots by those who, with good reason, believed that the papacy was now in the hands of whores, like the puppets whose strings were so diligently pulled by Algitude. The pornocracy popes were eager partners in the dissidence and immorality that characterized this shameless and shameful era. So, if you want to know what the word pornocracy is, okay, I think it might have to do with pornography or just the way these inappropriate lifestyles, like Sergius the Third's mistress. But let me read this little short sentence in bold print. A portrait of Morazia, the picture I just showed you, the shameless strumpet who schemed her way to power in Rome in the 10th century CE and matched her lover, Pope Sergius the Third, for licentiousness and vice. So let me just grab my phone right here. So I'm going to look up the word. Let me just look it up. Porn. Let me see. It's right here. Porno. Porno. Not. See. Let me see. I'm sorry. Pornocracy. Pornocracy. Okay, here we go. It'll tell me. Probably borrowed from German pornocrate, first found in the writings of Austrian-born biblical scholar Alfred. Pronunciation. Okay, the period of the papacy known as the Saeculum Obscurum, Latin for dark age. Well, of course, Europe was in a dark age still, like I said, and also as the rule of the harlots, which began with the installations of Pope Sergius III in 904 and lasted for 60 years until the death of Pope John XII in 964, during which time the popes were strongly influenced by the Theophylact, Theophylact, Theophylacti, a powerful and corrupt aristocratic family. I'm trying to look for what it. I'm sorry. I'm trying to look for what the word means. Okay, pornocracy. In the history of the papacy, referred to as the pornocracy of the rule of the harlots. Pornocracy. Okay, I apologize. I apologize. I'm trying to look up this word as much as I can. If Here, let me do this really quick. Hey Siri, what does pornocracy mean? Okay, it looks like it can't answer for me. All right. So all I can say that with Sergius the Third's mistress and then other dark things that have happened, looks like the harlots or a lot of lustrous women had control within the papacy, rule of the harlots. So it looks like you had a we've had popes and mistresses who had been someone had any kind of control for any kind of power. I mean, lustrous kind of ways. I'm just guessing. I apologize. So we already know with Sergius the Third, part of the Cadaver Synod as a co-judge, rising to power to the papacy by murdering his predecessor, Pope Leo V, and then an anti-Pope Christopher, having a mistress at 30 years old. His mistress was 15, and then having a son who would later become Pope, which I'm going to get into next in the next video. So Razia. So we'll get into in the next video with John the 11th. So tell me what you think in this video about the papacy of Pope Sergius III. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and tell me what you think. All right, this wraps it up for this video, and I'll see you next time. Take care now. Bye.